برحب بكم جميعا، وبسم الله ما شاء الله يعني قامات المرشدين السياحيين كلهم هنا. انا يعني مش عاوز اذكر اسماء عشان كده في ناس بتزعل، بس لازم نتمشى على شويه اسامي لان الاسامي دي مهمه، وانا متخلف منهم تقريبا النهارده. الحاج صالح نقيب المرشدين السياحيين العام، معتز، الحاج بدوي فراج، الحاج انور، الاستاذ بدوي، الاستاذ الطيب، الاستاذ عبد الله، كل الناس المحترمه الموجودين. ويا رب يعني ما حدش يزعل لان كل الناس الموجوده عظيمه وناس محترمه، ويا رب السنه دي تكون مختلفه عن السنين اللي عدت يعني. باذن الله باذن الله بتكون افضل. المحاضره النهارده مهمه. مستر براير احنا عارفين، كلنا بنقدره وكلنا بنحب نسمع له، ودائما بنستفيد منه هنا في النقابه، ودائما ياتي بكل جديد. واحنا كان لنا الشرف برضه والحظ الوافر ان تكررت محاضراته في النقابه الفرعيه بالاقصر، واحنا سعداء بهذا ونشكر براير خالص على الموضوع ده. بعد المحاضره هيكون برضه في حفل تكريم، والحفله دي مهمه جدا وهنتكلم فيها ليه الحفله دي، وهنقول برنامجها بسرعه او الاسماء بتاعتها بسرعه. بس الاول عاوزكم كلكم ترحبوا براير بليز. I do believe it's a great honor that for many times we have Bob Brier here in our syndicate, and always I do believe that Bob Brier is one of the greatest Egyptologists all over the world, not just in one field. I mean, I will tell you a short story quickly, and this story is very important to me. Yesterday I met Bob Brier in Hatshepsut Temple. And what I say, trust me, and believe me, it's 100% true. He was explaining to his group, and I just let my guest away, and I started to listen to him. That's true 100%. And maybe he did notice that over time. So I always am interested about Bob Brier and his lectures and his way of talk. He has a great passion to the Egyptian history, and I wish that you enjoy the lecture tonight. Thank you.
What I'd like to talk about, it's good, right? I'd like to talk about Napoleon in Egypt tonight and the beginning of Egyptology. Yeah. This is Bonaparte when he went to Egypt in 1798. He's not the emperor. He's just a 29-year-old general who's just come from the Italian campaign, and he's undefeated. So he's never lost a battle, 29 years old, and he comes back to Paris. And the Directory, which is running the country, asks him to invade England. They want him to invade England. He refuses. He says no, he wants to invade Egypt. Now he has two reasons for invading Egypt. One makes sense for politics and economics. England is their enemy. England is their enemy. And if he could control Egypt, he could cut off England's land route to India and trade. So if he can control Egypt, he destroys England. Okay, we're good. Anyway, the other reason, though, is personal. And Bonaparte says it. He says, all great men begin in the East. He wants to be like Alexander the Great, and he says, Europe is too small for me. So it's this ego, this personality, he wants to invade Egypt. Now, Bonaparte is not just a general. He does many terrible things, and he does many great things. But he is not just a general. He is an intellectual. He is a member of the French Academy of Sciences in the Mathematics Division. And when he goes to Egypt, he decides to take with him he's going to take 55,000 soldiers, but he takes 135 savants. He takes scientists in all areas. He takes zoologists, mathematicians, botanists, everything. And they're the top. For example, in mathematics, he takes Fourier. from the Fourier transformations. Right? If you want, botany, he takes Redoute, the rose painter, right? In geology, he takes Dolomieu, after whom the mineral dolomite and the Dolomite mountain ranges. He takes all the best. And with them, he also takes students. The professors are going to go with him, and the professors take some of their students. So we have two kinds of people going on this expedition. We have the professors who are the top of the top, and we have their students. And their job is going to be to describe Egypt. They are going to record everything, the plants, the minerals, and the monuments. Now, the oldest man on the expedition is Vivant Denon. He's 55 years old. He's the oldest one on the expedition. He is later going to be the director of the Louvre, the first director of the Louvre, right? And before it was the Louvre, it was the Musée Napoleon, Napoleon's idea. So Denon will go. Now, this is someone I like, Geoffroy Saint-Hilaire, who is the great, great, great naturalist, right? Natural historian. He brings the first giraffe to Europe. Right? Brings a giraffe to Europe. And it's called Zafra. And it walked all the way from Marseille to Paris. Right? So that's Geoffroy Saint-Hilaire. Now, there are two guys that team up. I love these guys. Jollois. He's 21 years old. He's an engineer. Right? And he will team up with this guy, Devilliers, an 18-year-old student of engineering who will take his books with him to Cairo, and he will pass his examinations in Cairo. His professor will give him an exam, and he becomes an engineer in Egypt. Right? Now, if you want to see an interesting record of Devilliers, I just saw it for the first time 2 days ago. On the head, at the Ramesseum, on the head of the fallen statue, it's about at eye level, is a graffiti from Devilliers. It says Devilliers. There's one under from another one, Castex, the sculptor. But Devilliers, the first graffiti I ever saw for Devilliers on the head of the fallen Ramesses statue. But anyway, Devilliers. These two guys, 21 and 18, they're going to be a pair, and they're going to go up and down through Egypt, recording everything, and they'll do great things, as you will see. Now, Bonaparte lands at Alexandria, right? It's a storm. He doesn't want to wait. He says, no, we're landing now. They go in a storm. 8 men drown because he won't wait. But they take over Alexandria rather easily. Now, this is what it looked like when they came into Alexandria. Now, Alexandria, of course, was a small village, right? 1798, Alexandria was nothing. And they come into Alexandria, and Nicholas the Turk, one of the Arab chroniclers, describes what he saw. He said, no sooner did the sun disappear over the horizon than the immense French fleet approached the canal. Upon seeing the surface of the sea covered with ships, the inhabitants of Alexandria were seized with fright and terror. That's what Nicholas the Turk says. And it's fairly accurate. That's General Kleber, second in charge, right? Take over Alexandria in a few hours. They are in charge of Alexandria like that. Now, Bonaparte, always impatient, has his men march from Alexandria to Cairo. It is July, and he has not brought any canteens for water. He tells them, we will drink from the wells along the way. But the locals have filled in all the wells, and the men start dying of thirst. Many kill themselves because it's such a difficult war. They've also got their winter uniforms from Italy, so they're wearing wool in July and Escandria. You know, it's not easy. That's what their uniforms look like in Alexandria in July. Now, they're of course going to fight the Mamelukes, right? And the Mamelukes, as you all know, are this warrior class that were bought as slaves in the Circassian mountains and raised to be warriors. When they grow up, of course, they overthrow the Sultan and they take over. And they are basically ruling Egypt. And the Mamelukes fought in an interesting way. They all have 3 weapons. They have a lance, they have a sword, but they also have 2 pistols. 2 pistols. They're all cavalry, all on horses. They have 2 pistols. And when they go into battle, they have 2 servants running behind each one. And they go in and they fire the pistols, throw them over their shoulders. The servants get them. They go in with their swords and their lances, and then they come back around, and the servants have reloaded the pistols, given back to them, and they go back to fight again. These are the Mamelukes, right? They are fierce professionals. They live, of course, in the palaces, as you know. And this is Bonaparte getting ready for the Battle of the Pyramids. Now, as you all know, the Battle of the Pyramids doesn't take place right at the pyramids, right? It takes place in the village of Mbaba, where the camel market is today, Mbaba. It's about 8 miles from the pyramids. But Bonaparte knows, he's always interested in public relations and publicity for himself. And Bonaparte knows that if he calls it the Battle of the Pyramids, it'll sound much better than the Battle of the Melon Patch, which is where it was fought, in Melon Patch. So he calls it the Battle of the Pyramids. Before the pyramids, he makes this amazing statement. Soldiers from these heights, 40 centuries look down upon you. And what's amazing about it is, he's about right. It's 40 centuries old, the pyramids, roughly, and nobody knew that. That wasn't common knowledge. One wonders how he figured it out, how he guessed at it, but he says it. This is what the Battle of the Pyramids actually looked like. Bonaparte arranges his soldiers in 3 squares. His soldiers always fought in squares. There's one here right up front, there's another one here, and another back here. They have always used it in Italy, and they never lost. They have the riflemen right at the front. At the corner of the square, they have the cannon, the artillery. And inside, in case the Mamelukes break through, they have their cavalry. So you have 3 divisions, 55,000 men. Almost an equal number of Mamelukes. Almost. Bonaparte instructs his men, do not fire until the Mamelukes are right on top of it. Right on top of it. Now they, of course, trust Bonaparte. They've never lost with him, and they hold fire. The Mamelukes charge. They're getting closer. They hold fire. They're right on top of him. Bonaparte gives the signal, and they fire, and the Mamelukes are almost blown away. It looks like the battle is over before it began. The Mamelukes ride around, regroup, charge one more time. Same thing happens. The Mamelukes know it's over. They have lost. They are going to go south and never fight Bonaparte again. They will go south. General Desaix will chase the Mamelukes south for the next year and a half. And he will chase for a year. He will chase them south, never catch them. They know the deserts, they're much better at it. But Bonaparte is in charge of Cairo. These are these fantastic paintings that Bonaparte had done to show how wonderful he was, showing everybody begging for mercy from Bonaparte. Another one, he's presenting a sword to the mayor of Alexandria. Never happened. This is the famous Jérôme painting, which is pretty accurate, showing Bonaparte by the city of the dead, right? That's pretty accurate. That's what he looked like. And that's Cairo of the time. And this is Bonaparte saying, we are all basically Muslims, right? Bonaparte prints up a document. The first document ever printed in Egypt, right? There were no printing presses in Egypt before Bonaparte. Egypt had never printed a document. Right? He had gone to the Vatican, taken their typeface, brought it with him, brought 2 printers, 2 printing presses, and he prints up a document, a proclamation saying, I've come here to help you, I'm your friend, I'm freeing you from the Mamelukes, we are all basically Muslims. Bonaparte didn't believe that, but anyway, there's Bonaparte sort of dressed up, he's kind of being like one of the guys. This is celebrating the Moulin al-Nebi, right? It's another scene of Bonaparte looking at a mummy at the pyramids. These are all romantic paintings. This never happened. Now, August 1st, 1798. Bonaparte had kept his expedition a secret. Most of the men who sailed with him from France did not know where they were going. Fewer than 200 people knew where they were going. It was a secret. It was a great expedition. The British knew that they sailed, the whole fleet had sailed from Toulon, from Paris. They knew they sailed, but they didn't know where they were going. And they had sent Horatio Nelson to find the fleet and sink it. Nelson couldn't find it. He thought they may have gone to Cyprus, wasn't there. They all thought the Holy Land, wasn't there. And finally, August 1st, 1798, Nelson sails into Abu Qir Bay. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and he sees Bonaparte's fleet anchored right at Aboukir Bay. Right? Again, the Battle of the Nile did not take place on the Nile. It takes place at Aboukir Bay. But Bonaparte calls it the Battle of the Nile. Now the French, let me see if I can have a slide. Yeah, this is good. The French have a plan. Admiral Casabianca has anchored his fighting ships, the 13 ships of the line. He's anchored them as close to the shore as he can go. And the idea is he will take all his cannon and point them out towards the sea, the Mediterranean, so that if the enemy finds him, he has all his cannons ready to fire at them. And this is the French fleet in a line. The British come in 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and they decide to fight at night. The sun is going to set, and if they go in now, they will fight at night. Never done before. Nelson decides to fight at night. The other thing Nelson does, he sails in where it seemed to be impossible, between the shore and the French. He goes between them. And nobody knows how he knew he could do this. There are no charts of Alexandria's harbors. There's no depth soundings. Nelson just does it. So he's between the French. Their cannons are pointed the wrong way. They cannot fight back, the French, and they are all sunk. All the boats except one are sunk. The flagship of Bonaparte, which was renamed the L'Orient for this expedition, originally it was called the Dauphin Royal, renamed the L'Orient, had all the gunpowder for the expedition in its hull. When it caught fire, it blew up and made the loudest man-made sound ever heard on Earth. That's the L'Orient. Caught fire, about to blow up. Nelson knows he's won the battle, and he says, Bonaparte is in a jam, and he's not going to get out of it. And he was right. He didn't stay to fight. He's a naval man. He's not going to fight on land, and he just sails away. And Bonaparte is in trouble. And there's the L'Orient going up. Bonaparte hears of the disaster at Aboukir Bay 2 days later. He's in Cairo. And he prints up a proclamation for his soldiers. And all he says is that our ships fought valiantly, they were covered in glory, and never says that they lost or lost the fleet. Never. What does he do? He's stranded. He can't get supplies. He doesn't have ships to get in there. He's got no more soldiers. He can't get replacements. He founds the Institut d'Egypte, the first Egyptological organization in the world, the Institut d'Egypte. First one ever. It's Bonaparte's idea. And this is the founding of it here. This is Bonaparte. You've got General Kléber, who's very tall. This is Caffarelli. And we know all about the Institut d'Egypte. Now, Monge was president, but vice president was Bonaparte. Right? And the goals are to study and enlighten Egypt and to advise the Egyptian government. Nobody can do that even today. And there are 4 sections: mathematics, physics, political economy, and literature. And they are going to study all of Egypt. Bonaparte has some practical questions, though. He wants to know if he can make better bread. And he asks the scientists, investigate whether we can make better bread than the pita that the Egyptians are doing. And he wants his croissants. Yes, of course. And here's where the savants are living. They are taking over the Mamluk palaces, and they are living in Cairo in splendor. The botanists have a garden where they can plant their samples and see how they grow. And the savants start to study. They start to study the monuments. Now this, of course, is Pompey's Villa, right? The most boring monument in all of Egypt, probably. And what they wanted to do was measure the height. Does anybody know how they measured the height?
By a kite.
Yes, very good, by kite. They flew a kite to the top, pulled it tight, and then they had the string here, and then they measured the string. You could have done it by geometry and a shadow also. But the locals thought this was very funny. I mean, the local people thought, why do you have to measure it? It's right here. You can look at it. And later, there was a cartoon done by a Brit named Gilray. And he did this cartoon where he shows all the savants are on top of books are coming down, and if you look closely at the books, you can see the titles are funny. They're sort of making fun of the savants. They're things like the rights of crocodiles, things like that. But they make great fun of the savants. And this is Bonaparte, they're depicting him as this horrible fiend. But, Yvon Denon and the others will do a great recording of what Egypt is like. This is Denon, right, sketching. Now, after a year in Egypt, Bonaparte knows it's hopeless. He goes to Acre, right, now Akko, and he has his first land battle that he loses. He loses to Jejer Pasha. He wants to storm the fort. He can't do it. He gives up. His men start to suffer from the plague. They're dying very quickly. He marches them back to Cairo, and he knows it's all over. So 1 year from the time that he landed, he deserts his army. He leaves them there. He doesn't even tell them he's leaving. He leaves a letter for General Cléber and says, continue the victories, send the taxes back to Paris. I expect great things of you. Cléber knows it's over. Cléber's a smart man, and he's a good man. And he tries to work out a peace treaty with the Ottoman Empire. But he's assassinated before it will happen. So it's going to be another 2 years before they can work out peace. In the meantime, the army is stranded, the savants are stranded. This is Denon, by the way, doing a drawing of Dendera, but let me show you other things.
He didn't know the tradition. He didn't know the tradition.
What's the tradition?
He didn't know the tradition of the Egyptians. So he did a big mistake.
Oh.
That's why he was assassinated.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
There's Luxor. This is the depiction of Luxor Temple by Denon, right? When it had its 2 obelisks and shows the level of occupation. This is Bonaparte's, some of his soldiers went to the top of the Great Pyramid. Bonaparte never did that. Bonaparte went into the pyramid, saw the burial chamber, came out, and never said anything about it. We don't know what happened. His letter, he leaves a letter for Cléber saying, I'm leaving. And when he gets back to Paris, he has medals made commemorating his victories. He tells everybody he's won. And this is the Nile god, Nilus, not happy, but Nilus, the Roman version, chained by Bonaparte, conquest of Lower Egypt. He's got one for Upper Egypt too. But one of the most important things that happens after Bonaparte leaves is here, Rosetta. This is the Fort Rosetta, where they're digging the foundations to support one wall. One wall was weak, Bonaparte wanted it reinforced, the men finally do it, and they found the Rosetta Stone. It's going to be the key, as you all know. How many languages on the Rosetta Stone?
No.
Two. You gotta say 2. You gotta be accurate. You gotta be precise. 2.
None. All them writing.
There are 2 languages. Egyptian and Greek. Egyptian and Greek. What we have are 3 scripts. 3 scripts. We have the hieroglyphic script, we have the Demotic script, and we have Greek. So there's only 2 languages. This is Egyptian, this is Egyptian, but they're just written differently. The Greek, of course, they knew. And as soon as they found the stone, they knew that they had the key to deciphering hieroglyphs. They knew. Because at the end of the Greek inscription, it says, we have written this in the language of the priests, in the language of the people, and in our language. Right? It's a Ptolemaic document. So they knew they were going to be able to crack the code right then and there. Now, one thing that made it possible, does anybody know who the first one is to say that the cartouche contained the name of a king? Zoëga. When you go to the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, look up at the top where it has all the great Egyptologists. You will see Zoëga. Zoëga, in something like 1765, publishes a book on obelisks. And he says, I believe that these ovals contain the names of the kings. So he had taken that guess. He was the first one to make the guess. So then, of course, as you all know the story, and again, another misnomer, another mistake, you know, it does not contain the name of Ptolemy and Cleopatra, right? It contains only Ptolemy. Cleopatra is not mentioned on the Rosetta Stone at all. Just Ptolemy. The first words, of course, are Basileia Ptolemeo. So then you know King Ptolemy, and once you know King Ptolemy's there, you get the cartouche and you can figure it out, and then we're going. Thomas Young works that out very quickly, but this is the key to decipherment. Now, let me show you. Before Bonaparte went to Egypt, this is the kind of thing that was published in books of what obelisks and the pyramids look like. Very few people had been south of Cairo. Very few. And many of the books were just totally wrong about what things look like. Those are the pyramids of Giza. Right? Somebody had heard, well, they're pointy, they're on a plateau, and this is very, very rough. Somebody's looking for a chair, but not much. So anyway, before Bonaparte, that's what things looked like. After Bonaparte, that's what it looks like. When Bonaparte's army is finally forced to sign a truce or a treaty, whatever you want to call it, they surrender. They give up. The general in charge after Kléber is Abdallah Manu. Right? General Manu had married an Egyptian in Alexandria, changed his name, adopted Islam, and Abdallah Manu signs a treaty. Now, yeah. Now, what happens is, the deal is, everything that the savants have collected goes to England. The plants, the birds, the minerals, everything. The savants say no. We've risked our lives. Some of us have died. We are not giving you our specimens. We'd rather burn them like the library at Alexandria than give them to you. The English are decent. They say, okay, keep the birds, keep the plants, we'll take all the antiquities. And they did. And that is why the Rosetta Stone is in the British Museum and not the Louvre. Right? That's right. That's right. So this is the first accurate depiction that Europe really sees of Egypt. It's done by the savants. And the way they did it was, while they were in Egypt, they're doing their drawings and their paintings. When they return to Paris, they take the paintings and drawings and they're given to engravers. And the engravers have a large copper plate and they look at the painting, engrave on the copper the same, and that way you can print multiples. And they published the Description de l'Egypte, which at that time was the largest publication in the history of the world. It was 1,000 engravings like that. 1,000 pages this big, right? And 22 volumes of text. So it's the first time that Europe really learns what Egypt looks like. Now, you have all heard the story of Bonaparte using the Sphinx for target practice with artillery. It's simply not true. We have pictures of the Sphinx from the 18th century from guys like Pocock and Norden, early travelers, and it shows the nose is missing. It's the same. It's the same. Bonaparte would never do that to a monument. He always respected ancient monuments. He didn't respect religions of any kind, but monuments he was okay with. So anyway, that's the Sphinx. This is an invention of Bonaparte's army. Does anybody know what it is? It's a camel ambulance. It's for, when somebody's ill, the camel goes into the battlefield. The sick person who's wounded goes inside here. It takes two people, one on each side of the camel. The leg can be hanging down here if it's been shot, and it gets them off the battlefield. It's like an ambulance but with a camel. That's invented by Larrey, the physician. They do some of the first ethnographic studies, careful portraits of the locals, careful portraits of Egyptians. Now this is one of my favorite artists, Cécile. Cécile drew 22 engravings in the Description de l'Egypte, and he drew himself into every one. Every one. Here you can see the temp, right? There's Cecile, right there on his drawing table. He's getting bolder, right? It's the most important thing in the painting, but he draws himself in every one. But this is how Europe is going to learn about Egypt. Now, the young men I told you about, De Villiers and Jollois, who team up, the two of them, they do fabulous things. Now remember, they're only 18 and 21 years old. 18 and 21. They are the ones who draw the Dendera Zodiac. They go to Dendera and spend a month there, drawing every inch that they can do in a month. Remember, a war is going on. People are being killed. 34 of the savants are killed. And they do the Dendera Zodiac. And when they come back, it's published in the Description de l'Egypte. And it's a sensation. And as you all know, the French government sent people back in 1822 and they took it. Right? And it's in the Louvre today. And it's interesting, by the way, it's not displayed prominently in the Louvre. It has a room of its own in a corner in the back. And I think they're afraid that Zahid's going to ask for it back, so they don't want to show it. Yeah, yeah.
The things like the ram and behind it.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I need to do.
Yeah. They're not saying we got it. But anyway, there's the Zodiac. And that's why when we take people to Dendera, we have to show them the plaster copy at top. Now the other thing that these two guys, Jollois and De Villiers, do, they do the first careful map of the Valley of the Kings. The first careful map. And if you look carefully, you'll see that there's an isolated tomb in the west. They discovered the tomb of Amenhotep III. Right by I's tomb, you know, there's Amenhotep III in his eye in the West Valley. They discovered the tomb of Amenhotep III. Now, because they couldn't read hieroglyphs, they didn't know whose tomb they discovered. They didn't know it was Amenhotep III. There you see it? Tombeau, isolated in the west. And that's some of the souvenirs they took home with them. They found Ushaptis in the tomb. And they took home some of the... Yeah, that's same thing.
Not
By
again.
that time, it is
No get it. No get it.
Or take it out in a way.
Anyway, these are still in the family of Jollois and De Villiers in France. They still have them. But these are souvenirs that the boys took. They are engineers, so they don't only draw the temples, they do careful architectural plans, they do elevations, side views. This is the first time anybody has ever done this for the temples of Egypt. And Europe is going to go wild. It is going to be fantastic for Europe. They also did kind of romantic recreations of what the temples looked like in ancient times, filling in the colors, what the capitals looked like. That's the famous one of them measuring the Sphinx. And when you bought the Description de l'Egypte, when you bought a set of the descriptions, only for the wealthy, of course, you got a special medal with it. And this is the medal which shows Gaul, France, discovering Egypt. One of the most important things they did is Antinopolis. When Hadrian visited Egypt, he came with his lover, a young boy named Antinous. And Antinous drowned in the Nile. And to commemorate the death of Antinous, Hadrian built a Roman city, Antinopolis. Napoleon said it was the largest Roman city in Egypt. The largest Roman city in Egypt. And this is what it looked like. These are the savants' drawings of Antinopolis. I think I may have one more. Let me see. No, sorry, that one. It's a good thing they recorded it. There are 4 or 5 different drawings of the city. Because in 1834, the whole thing was taken down to build a cement factory. And it was all ground up for cement. Right? So it's gone. The only records we have are these. Another important record they did. You may be familiar with this one. This is one of the engravings from the Description de l'Egypte. You may know where it comes from? What temple? You've never seen it on the temple. Okay. It's important. It looks like a Mamizi scene, doesn't it? Okay. But who's the birth? No. No. It's a good one. It's a tough one. I'll tell you why you've never seen it. The savants recorded the block, but the block is now gone. It's from Armont. It's from Armont. And as you all know, Armont is one of the places, aside from Denver, where you can see the name of Cleopatra VII. Armont is built to commemorate the birth of Caesarion, the child of Cleopatra. And this shows Cleopatra giving birth, sitting down just like the Egyptian women did. And the feet are coming out here, the wall is damaged, and here are the goddesses assisting at the birth and suckling the child. So this is Cleopatra giving birth to Caesarion. That block is gone now. We don't know where it is. Maybe it's ground up, maybe it's reused, who knows. But this is an important block. Now, they didn't have time to record everything. So they're saying there's hieroglyphs here, but we don't have time. But still, it's a very important record that would have been lost without Bonaparte's men. They also record the chairs from the Valley of the Kings, things like that. They're recording all the things on the walls. Wait. What happened? Let me see if I get it going. I only have a couple more, but... Is it stuck? What do you think? Is it okay? Thank you. Yep, you did it. Thank you. This, of course, is the tomb of Ramses III, the Harper scene in the little niche in there, right? The two Harper scenes, which was discovered by Bruce, an Englishman, Scotsman, looking for the source of the Nile, who discovers these scenes, and it was called Bruce's tomb then, right? And this is the Harper scene. They recorded that. There's the other one, right? There's two, right? Equally important, they recorded the birds, the plants, and this is one of their drawings, the Egyptian vulture, right? Beautiful. The cobra, they recorded that. They're recording everything. The shells. And this is the title page for the Description de l'Egypte. This is pulling everything together. It's a pastiche. It's a melange. It's got Osiride pillars. It's got the Denver zodiac. It's got a mummy. It's got pyramids in the background. It's got columns. But it was kind of a romantic depiction of all the things you could find in Egypt. And Europe went wild when they finally saw this in the Description de l'Egypte. There were 1,000 sets of the Description, right? 11 volumes. Think about it. 1,000 sets of 1,000 engravings. That's 1,000,000 sheets of paper. All handmade. All handmade. It took 5 companies just to make the paper. Just to make the paper was 5 companies. There was 2 volumes of État moderne. There's 2 volumes of l'Histoire naturelle. Oh, I ran out of this. And a volume of maps. The maps were the last thing published. They were the first accurate maps of Egypt. And Bonaparte wanted them kept a secret. He wanted it a secret. It's a military secret. So it wasn't until 1822 that they published the maps. But as I said, Europe went crazy. England Wedgwood made in 1808 a tea service with crocodile handles, hieroglyphs, a sort of hieroglyphs around a winged solar disk around the rim. Sphinxes, and for the first time you get hieroglyphs on them, and it's almost accurate. You can almost read it, right? You can almost see it's a Hotep-Tenisu, almost, right? You see the Biyan, right? That's supposed to be a Wasset, I think. So you can almost make out the hieroglyphs. So for the first time, people are aware of hieroglyphs because everybody's starting to try to translate hieroglyphs, and by 1821, Napoleon will do it. So we get a whole new way of viewing Egypt. The French, when Bonaparte gets back, he makes a dinner service for Josephine. It's a service for 22 people. Each dinner plate has a hand-painted scene of a different temple or a battle in Egypt with the gods going around the rim. Right? Egypt, it was the beginning of Egyptology, of translation of hieroglyphs, of careful recording of the monuments, and of Egyptomania. That's it. Thank you. Let me try to turn on the light. I think it's here? Yep. Any questions, though? I mean, I went fast. I have so much to say. Go ahead.
One comment.
Sure.
The first tableau,
Yes.
which Napoleon with many people after the second man in left.
Yes.
On the right, Baghous Pasha. He not, somebody not famous in this day,
Yeah.
but after 10 years, during Muhammad Ali,
Right.
he became the first man in Egypt.
Yes. Bravo. Bravo. He's coming.
When you said about the writing, two languages, but by that time Greek was known to be spoken. Hieroglyphic and Demotic were unknown how to speak. That's why we call them writing that language.
I'm not sure you mean demonic wasn't known how to speak. They're writing demonic when demonic is spoken all the time in Egypt. Demonic is a language.
I'm talking about the time when Napoleon Bonaparte was here.
Oh, sure.
It wasn't.
It's a language, we just didn't know it.
No, it wasn't as a language, it was as a writing. Nobody knows how to speak it.
That's true. It's still a language, we just don't know how to speak it.
Different language means to speak, writing to write down. Something written down. Okay.
There are languages that can only be written and not spoken. There are languages that can be spoken and not written. There are languages that can be written and spoken.
That's what I mean, non-spoken.
It's an unspoken, yes, it wasn't spoken.
That's it. Thank you.
Tamam.
What is the information? He said, you know, when he came to Luxor, he took a Coptic man, his name George, who taught Napoleon the Coptic language.
Yes.
From it, he get compared between the ancient language and the Coptic, he translates his name George.
Not quite. Not quite.
I'm sure about it.
Let me say why.
And his family is still Luxor until now.
Let me say why. Not quite. Champollion?
Not Napoleon, they say. I say, you know,
Oh, to say yes. Yes. To say yes. Ah, I thought you said Champollion. So,
No.
to say yes.
The photo from Armand, where did he get it?
Which photo?
Which you said nobody had seen it before.
Okay. That's from the Description de l'Egypte. It existed in 1798, but now it's gone. I can leave it on the computer for you, and if you want it, we can leave it on the computer. Keep it. It's everybody's.
No, because you have said that nobody had seen it.
Yeah.
Any more questions, guys?
Sir, please.
In terms of art, why in all the ancient Egyptians have scaled down the lashes on their statues?
Say it again, we're still doing it.
Along all the Egyptian history,
Yes.
in terms of arts, all the artisans along different periods and different eras, they scaled making the lashes of their
Oh,
statues.
interesting. There are no eyelashes.
And no mustache.
No eyelashes.
Now, I wonder.
And no mustache.
No, there are mustaches. There are mustaches, sure. Ron Effer and Nofred and here. I'm not sure about the eyelashes. It's a very good question. Are there other eyelashes on other statues? Wait. All right. Now, I'm not sure about other stone statues. I'm not sure if it's possible to do eyelashes on stone statues. But we have certainly mummies. The cartonnage has lashes in the Greco-Roman period. And I don't know if that counts.
They did
It's a good question.
They did malachite to cover, decorate the eyes.
One last question.
The camel as an ambulance.
Wait one second.
According to the picture, the camel as an ambulance.
Yes.
Is it true that Napoleon suffered migraine and then he was offered to go into the Great Pyramid because of the electromagnetic field?
No. What we do know, I can tell you what we know. Bonaparte went to the pyramids with his men, some of his officers. They wanted to climb. And I think Bonaparte was afraid of heights. So he encouraged them to climb. He said, no, I'll stay down here. Then he went in with a couple of guides with torches into the burial chamber. He came out. One of his officers was at the entrance, where you come out. And Bonaparte was kind of shaken. He looked sick. And he said to him, General, are you all right? And Bonaparte said, you'd never believe it. And he said, what? And he said, never mind. And that was it. So that's all we know.
As an example,
I would like to say, please, the last comment, I did notice something very important by Dr. Brier. He's always saying Bonaparte. And always we say wrongly Napoleon. So,
He's not Napoleon.
that's right. And as a professional, much better to say Bonaparte, not Napoleon. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you. That was great. Thank you very much. It's good to see you guys again. Let me say one thing, one last thing. One of the things that I'm sure about, it's been very difficult for the last 3 years for all of us. Very difficult. I can tell you that it's going to get better, for sure, because I can see the bookings in America now. When we start to have people come in, Mohammed Abdul Latif back there is going to be guiding 4 groups of 90 people next year. And I've got groups of 20s coming, and the Americans are starting to come again. So it will be better next year, for sure.
Inshallah. Thank you.
I did it.